So this is a just one slide actually from a presentation that I have called Culture Eats DevOps for Breakfast. And so even though I'm talking about engineering and organization and the management of people, throughout the whole thing is really some basic concepts that affect your ability to move from waterfall to agile. And all of this learning comes from work we've done with a range of organizations that have been both born agile and organizations that are moving waterfall to an agile and a DevOps world. Pretty much all of the organizations make the vast majority of these errors. The difference is the rate at which they respond to them. So organization like Ryanair, the CEO, Michael O'Leary, has read the Phoenix project. He's really committed. He's driving it. When they hit blockers or they hit problems, it's not an issue for them to kind of diagnose it, take the time about diagnosing it and then get over it. AIB have been trying to transform themselves for probably about 3 or 4 years, and they're having some success, but large chunks of their business are still kind of stumbling over these problems and trying to figure out how to address them. So we all know organizations should be agile, organizations should be flatter and closer to the business. And invariably what we see is that teams do start out, the agile team is quite good, but it's handing off to test, and then they get that into the team, and then it hands off to release, and then they get that into the team. So it kind of shifts right for a while until they get the team fully made. So there's kind of like a lot of learning and slow moving to get that SME handoff removed. A variant of this, Ryanair had it, Daily Telegraph had it as well, is this kind of the DevOps team, which becomes a bottleneck in its own right. So the devs are trying to get their release scripts done, and ops want the infra stuff updated, but the team in the middle, there's 3 or 4 of them, or whoever, whatever many, they're the bottleneck. I sometimes think this might be actually a little bit of a sort of a rite of passage, because actually getting the skills in around release and automation support, that's a good idea, and they go from there into the actual sprint teams themselves. So it's not necessarily the worst thing to get a bit of a jump on it. Cargo cult. So this is the idea where people are kind of going through the motions, but they're not actually getting things done. And it originates with the Melanesian population of people who were in an island in the South Sea that was in an advantageous position to attack Japan during the Second World War. So this indigenous population had a belief that said that food and drink would come from their ancestral spirits on ships. And in 1942 or thereabouts, these planes started to arrive with food and drink. So their belief system was now upheld. But of course, in 1945, the planes left. So what they did was they said, they didn't really get it. So they started building, satellites from straw and so forth. And what we've seen with agile teams and DevOps teams as well is, yes, I'm sprinting. Yes, I'm, observing my ceremonies, et cetera, but I'm not actually cranking get code into production. And cycle time, what's that? And are we really being true in our retrospectives to what, our measurement was? Was our analysis good, et cetera? So it's kind of like, it's good in a way that people are kind of acting their way into a new way of thinking, but what they really want to be doing is thinking their way into a new way of acting. And sometimes you look at this and you say, well, how did they ever get there? And you sometimes arrive into sites and you see people doing things and you wonder, how did they ever, they'd be better off building straw satellites than code. So now I'm kind of going to skip through this one reasonably quickly because I think, so if I look at the treat your servers like pets, so we see this with kind of the Linux team, the silo of guys, and they're just really specialists in that kind of area. And when you want to get them out of that and building scripts and building infrastructures, code type scripts, but they're wedded to their Linux servers and their domain knowledge. And there's an organization structure and a pay scale around that kind of, encourages them to just be good in that little silo. So it's a difficult one. Configuration drift is something that can be solved. Again, there's just tons of process around this that particularly large banking organizations have, jobs and pay scales built in around this kind of thing. And then the classic is the guys say, well, yeah, we're a DevOps team, but actually they're running everything manually. The management of people. So this is kind of, whenever we engage an organization, we try to look at these 3 areas, organization, engineering, and management of people. And we try to look at them in terms of what good looks like and where they are right now. And ideally put some numbers around them. But this is one of the ones that's hardest to kind of put numbers around. So particularly in the insurance sector, failure is just considered unacceptable. It's nobody has got anywhere in that organization by taking a risk. In fact, their careers have been cul-de-saced if they did take risks. So it's very difficult in an organization like that to persuade people that it's okay to fail. So you really have to break it out into some kind of a POC. let them fail. Let's get to a place where we're actually, putting code into production, and then broadcast that to everybody within the organization, and and then wrap incentives around it. Do you think you're finished as a real kind of waterfall feel to it? I've kind of got that one done, let's move on to the next, as opposed to this idea that we're continuously improving to a point where the cost of the improvement is greater than any benefit that we might derive. So this idea that you think you're finished is a very common concept that, and it's hard to kind of persuade people that it's not done, it's not a waterfall, we're constantly getting there. And then the issued messengers, I think possibly everybody's heard of this one, but it's this guy in the 60s called Westrom who put together the idea of there's effectively a pathological, a bureaucratic, or a generative culture in an organization. So gives a number of examples, but the messenger comes in with bad news. In a pathological environment, he gets shot. In a bureaucratic environment, we have a meeting and talk about it, but we do nothing. And in a generative culture, we actually look at what's happened, and we come up with ways and means of kind of how could we solve that. Now, I was talking to one of our agile coaches during the week, and he was telling me about an organization that we're working with at the moment. And on any given day, or depending on the proximity to the release, the senior management are capable of being all three of those modes in the one day, right? And I think, and that same management team is saying, you're empowered guys, tell us what we need to do. We're your servants. What do we need to get out of your way? And so, within the same half hour, they're there shooting messengers with bad news. So, but it's incumbent on the people in that team to get back to that manager, not necessarily in full view, but quietly, and say, hey guys, you said you wanted a generative culture, so that wasn't very generative. And now the last one, and this is the one that I think is kind of the biggest disabler for organizations, which is if you don't have somebody who's at the C-suite pushing for you, you're a goner.